Victoria Davenport is standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of her corner office on the 14th floor of the Davenport Analytics Building in downtown Boston, watching the rain hammer the sidewalk below at 7:43 on a Monday morning in March, when she sees a man sitting on the bench across the street with no umbrella and no coat, just a gray thermal shirt soaked through to the skin, his head bowed over something in his lap, a notebook, she thinks, though she can't tell from this height. And she watches him for 2 full minutes before her assistant, Tessa, knocks on the glass door and says, "Victoria, your 9 o'clock is here." And Victoria turns away from the window. But the image of the man on the bench stays with her, the way he sat, perfectly still in the downpour, as if the rain were irrelevant, as if whatever was in that notebook mattered more than being dry. She doesn't know his name yet. She doesn't know that the notebook contains equations. She doesn't know that the man on the bench is the answer to the problem that has been eating her company alive for the past 5 months. But she will. The 9 o'clock is a disaster. Not the meeting itself. The meeting is fine, all smiles and handshakes and quarterly projections displayed on a screen the size of a dining table. The disaster is what the projections show. Victoria sits at the head of the conference table, her dark hair pulled back in a low bun, her charcoal blazer buttoned precisely, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. She looks exactly like what she is, the CEO of a data analytics firm that she built from nothing over the past 12 years, starting in a rented office above a laundromat in Somerville with 3 employees and a second-hand server rack. Now it's 140 employees across 2 floors, contracts with hospitals, insurance companies, and 2 federal agencies, and a reputation for solving the problems that nobody else can solve, except this one. The problem is called Meridian. That's the internal code name. It's the largest contract Davenport Analytics has ever pursued, a predictive analytics platform for a consortium of New England hospitals that would allow them to forecast patient surges, optimize staffing, allocate resources in real time across 17 facilities. The contract is worth $42 million over 5 years. Victoria's team has been building the algorithm for 11 months. It doesn't work. Not completely. The algorithm handles 12 of the 17 hospitals accurately, but the remaining 5, the rural ones, the ones with unpredictable emergency intake patterns and staffing shortages that ripple through the system in ways that don't fit standard models, those 5 throw everything off. The predictions collapse, the error margins balloon. The entire platform becomes unreliable because the system can't account for chaos. Victoria has thrown everything at it. Her best data scientists, a team of 9, all with advanced degrees from MIT and Stanford and Carnegie Mellon, have been grinding on the rural hospital problem for 5 months. They've tried machine learning approaches, Monte Carlo simulations, Bayesian networks, agent-based modeling. Nothing sticks. The rural hospitals are too variable, too human, too messy for the clean mathematical models her team builds. The consortium's deadline is April 15th, 6 weeks away. If Davenport Analytics can't deliver a working platform by then, they lose the contract. $42 million. And worse, they lose their reputation, the thing Victoria has spent 12 years constructing with the same precision she applies to everything in her life. We're close, says Raj, her lead data scientist, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual look of cautious optimism that Victoria has learned to distrust. The urban model is solid. We just need to crack the rural variable. You've been saying that for 3 months, Raj. I know, but we've narrowed the problem. It's the cascading staffing variable. When one rural hospital loses a nurse or a tech, it creates a chain reaction across the network that our current model can't predict. We need a way to model human behavior under resource scarcity, and that's... He trails off. That's what? Victoria asks. That's not really a math problem, Raj says quietly. It's a human problem, and our models don't do human very well. Victoria removes her glasses and pinches the bridge of her nose. She doesn't say what she's thinking, which is that $42 million and 200 jobs are riding on a math problem that might not be a math problem, and that terrifies her more than anything has terrified her in years. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that sometimes the answer to your biggest problem is sitting right outside your door. And while you're at it, subscribe to Untold Hearts because we're just getting started. The man on the bench is named Graham Everett. He is 44 years old. He has thick dark hair that hasn't been cut in 4 months, a lean build that used to be athletic and is now just thin, a jaw covered in stubble that's almost a beard, and hands that are calloused in ways they never used to be. From sleeping on concrete, from gripping the edges of park benches, from the particular wear that comes from carrying everything you own in a single backpack. He is sitting in the rain because the rain doesn't bother him. Very little bothers Graham anymore, which is either a sign of profound peace or profound damage, and he's never been sure which. The notebook in his lap is a composition book, the black and white marbled kind that costs $1.29 at the drugstore. It's his 4th one this year. The pages are filled with equations, diagrams, flowcharts, and dense blocks of handwriting that slope to the right the way all his writing has since he was a child. The equations are not homework. They're not idle doodling. They are Graham's way of staying alive, the mathematical part of his brain continuing to function even after everything else has fallen apart, the way a heart keeps beating in a body that has forgotten how to move. Before the bench, before the shelters and the soup kitchens and the cold nights under the overpass on Kendall Street, Graham Everett was a quantitative analyst at Harman & Keyes, one of the most prestigious financial engineering firms on Wall Street. His specialty was predictive modeling, specifically building algorithms that could forecast complex system behaviors in environments with high variability and incomplete data. In plain English, Graham was the man you called when the math was too messy for everyone else. He was very, very good at it. His models predicted the 2019 repo market disruption 3 weeks before it happened. His framework for cascading failure analysis was adopted by 2 major banks and 1 sovereign wealth fund. He published papers in journals that most people have never heard of, presented at conferences where the audience consisted entirely of people who thought in Greek letters and probability distributions, and earned a salary that allowed him to live in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with his wife, Laura, and their daughter, Phoebe. Then, Laura got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3 at diagnosis. The doctor said 18 months. She lasted 14. During those 14 months, Graham took leave from Harman & Keyes to care for her. He managed her medications, drove her to treatments, held her hair back when she vomited, read to her when the pain made sleeping impossible, and sat beside her bed at 3 a.m, doing the only thing he knew how to do, solving problems, except the problem of his wife dying was not solvable, and the part of him that had always believed mathematics could explain everything discovered in those dark months, that it couldn't explain the thing that mattered most. Laura died on a Wednesday in April. Phoebe was 11. Graham went back to work 2 weeks later because the brownstone had a mortgage, and Phoebe needed stability, and Graham needed to not be in the apartment where Laura had died. But something had shifted. Not broken, shifted. The way a foundation settles after an earthquake. You can still stand on it, but you know it's not level anymore. At Harman & Keyes, Graham's work began to change. He started asking questions that quants don't ask. He looked at the models his team was building. Models that predicted market behavior, that optimized portfolios, that moved billions of dollars based on mathematical certainty. And he started seeing the people inside the numbers, not abstractions, people. The pension fund manager in Ohio, whose retirement depended on a model that Graham knew was built on incomplete assumptions. The small-town bank in Vermont that would get crushed when the algorithm decided their mortgage-backed securities weren't worth holding. The janitor at the firm's headquarters who emptied Graham's trash every night and whose own savings were invested in a fund that Graham's team was quietly advising clients to short. He brought these concerns to his supervisor, a man named Whitfield, who listened patiently and then said, "Graham, your job is to model the math, not the morality." Graham couldn't do that anymore. The math and the morality had fused in his head and he couldn't separate them. He tried. For 6 months, he tried. He sat at his desk and built models and pretended that the numbers were just numbers, but every time he ran a simulation, he saw Laura's face, not because finance had killed her, but because her death had taught him that behind every number there is a person, and that person has a family, and that family has a life, and that life is fragile and brief and worth more than any algorithm can calculate. He resigned on a Friday afternoon. walked into Whitfield's office, set his badge on the desk, and said, "I'm done." No 2 weeks' notice, no exit interview, no forwarding address. That was 3 years ago. The descent was not dramatic. It was gradual, the way water erodes stone, not in a flood, but in a slow, relentless drip. Graham gave Phoebe to Laura's sister, Denise, in Connecticut. He told himself it was temporary, that he needed time to figure things out, that Phoebe would be better off in a stable home while he sorted himself out. He signed the guardianship papers with steady hands and a clear mind, and then drove away from Denise's house and pulled over 2 miles later and sat in the car with his forehead against the steering wheel for 45 minutes. He sold the brownstone, paid off the mortgage, put the rest in a trust for Phoebe, moved into a studio apartment in Cambridge, then a room in a boarding house in Dorchester, then a shelter in Roxbury, then the streets. The last conversation with Phoebe replays in his mind more than any equation ever could. She was standing in Denise's kitchen in Connecticut, 12 years old, wearing a sweatshirt that was too big for her, Laura's old Yale sweatshirt, the one with the cracked lettering. And she was holding a glass of orange juice in both hands, the way she'd held things since she was a toddler, with that two-fisted grip, as if the world might snatch it away. "How long?" she asked. "I don't know, Phoebes. Not long. I need some time to figure things out." Figure what things out? He didn't have an answer. He had 100 answers. His career, his finances, his mind, the gaping wound where Laura used to be. But none of them would make sense to a 12-year-old standing in someone else's kitchen. None of them would translate into anything other than what they were. A father leaving. "Dad things," he said, which was the worst possible answer, and he knew it even as the words left his mouth. Phoebe set the orange juice on the counter. She didn't cry. She looked at him with Laura's eyes, those dark, precise eyes that could read a room the way Graham read equations, and she said, "Mom wouldn't want this." 3 words that hit harder than anything Whitfield or any supervisor or any market crash ever had. Mom wouldn't want this. She was right. Laura would have grabbed him by the collar and said, "Graham Allen Everett, you sit down at that table and you eat breakfast with your daughter and you go find a job and you stop feeling sorry for yourself because that is not who I married." Laura had been the load-bearing wall. Without her, the structure failed. But Phoebe was still standing in the wreckage, and Graham was about to walk out the door. He walked out the door. He thinks about it every day. Every single day. On the bench, in the shelter, in the library, at 3 in the morning when the city is silent, and the only sound is his pen on paper. Mom wouldn't want this. It's the equation he can't solve. How to be the man Laura believed in when Laura isn't there to believe in him anymore. He doesn't drink. He doesn't use drugs. He's not mentally ill, at least not in any way that has a convenient label. He's a man who lost the 2 things that made his life make sense, his wife, and his belief that his work mattered. And when those things disappeared, the structure of his life collapsed the way a building collapses when you remove the load-bearing walls. But the math never stopped. That's the thing about Graham Everett that anyone looking at him on that bench in the rain would never guess. The man in the soaked gray thermal shirt with the backpack and the stubble and the composition notebook is still, beneath all of it, one of the finest mathematical minds in the country. He solves problems the way other people breathe, involuntarily, constantly, without conscious effort. He reads discarded newspapers on the T and spots statistical errors in the reporting. He sits in the public library and works through textbooks on stochastic processes and network theory. He fills composition notebooks with equations that solve problems nobody has asked him to solve. He's invisible. But his mind is not. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to share it and subscribe to Untold Hearts, because sometimes the most brilliant people are the ones nobody sees. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The second time Victoria sees the man on the bench, it's Wednesday of the same week. Still raining. He's in the same spot, same thermal shirt. She wonders if it's the only one he has. Same notebook. This time he's writing, not just looking at the page. His hand is moving with a speed and fluidity that catches her attention, even from 14 floors up. The third time is Friday. The rain has stopped, but the bench is wet, and he's sitting on a folded newspaper to keep dry. The notebook is open. and he's staring at a page with the kind of intensity that Victoria recognizes because she's seen it on the faces of her own data scientists when they're close to something. That narrow-eyed, jaw-tight focus that means the mind is wrestling with a problem, and the body has forgotten it exists. On Monday of the second week, Victoria gets to the office at 6:30 a.m., early even for her, and the man is already there. In the gray morning light, she can see him more clearly. He's younger than she expected, clean-shaven today, or at least more shaven than before. His posture is straight, not the slumped posture she associates with the homeless men she passes on her walk from the parking garage. He sits like someone who once sat in conference rooms. Tessa notices her staring. "You've been watching that guy all week," Tessa says. Tessa is 28, blunt, efficient, and has worked for Victoria for 4 years. She's the only person in the building who isn't afraid of her. "He's there every morning. There are a lot of homeless people in Boston, Victoria. He's writing in a notebook every day for hours." Tessa shrugs. "Maybe he's a writer." "Maybe." Victoria turns from the window, but she doesn't stop thinking about him. The thing that pushes her over the edge is the whiteboard. Thursday, end of week 2. Victoria stays late, 9 p.m., which is not unusual. She walks the floor the way she does when she can't sleep and can't go home because the apartment is too quiet. She passes the main conference room where Raj's team has been working on Meridian. The whiteboards are covered in equations and diagrams, the cascading staffing variable, the rural hospital problem, the thing that's going to cost her $42 million and maybe her company. She stands in front of the whiteboard for 10 minutes, reading the equations. Victoria is not a mathematician. Her background is in business analytics, which means she understands what the models do but not always how they work. But she can read the frustration in the handwriting. She can see where equations have been started and abandoned, where someone wrote a promising line of reasoning and then crossed it out with a single violent stroke. The whiteboard is a record of failure, methodical and exhaustive. She looks out the window. The bench is empty. It's too late, too dark. But she thinks about the man and his notebook and the way his hand moved across the page, and she makes a decision that she will later describe as either the smartest or the craziest thing she's ever done. She makes a phone call. The next morning, Friday, Victoria walks across the street at 7:15 a.m. She's wearing her charcoal blazer and carrying 2 cups of coffee from the shop on the corner. The rain has returned, lighter now, more mist than downpour. The man is on the bench. His backpack is beside him. The notebook is in his lap. She stops in front of him. He looks up. His eyes are brown, darker than she expected, and sharper. There's no confusion in them, no haze, no vacancy. He looks at her the way someone looks at a person who has interrupted a conversation, politely, but with an awareness that something has been disrupted. "Morning," Victoria says. "Morning," the man says. His voice is calm, clear, a baritone with no roughness in it. "I brought you a coffee. I didn't know how you take it, so it's black." He looks at the cup, then at her. "Thank you." He takes it. His hands are steady. She notices the calluses, the ink stains on his fingers. Not dirt, ink from writing. "My name is Victoria Davenport. I run the company across the street." She gestures at the building behind her. "I know," he says. "Davenport Analytics. Your name is on the building." She almost smiles. "What's yours?" "Graham." "Graham, I have an unusual question for you." He waits. No fidgeting, no nervousness, just waiting. "I need someone to clean my office building, nights. It's temporary. Our cleaning service canceled and we're between contracts. It would be 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. I'd pay cash, $20 an hour, and there's a shower in the gym on the second floor you'd be welcome to use." Graham looks at her for a long moment. She can see him calculating, not the money, but the situation, evaluating her the way she imagines he evaluates everything. "Why me?" he asks. "Because you're here every morning. Because you're clearly not using drugs or drinking. Because you look like someone who used to have a life and might want a way back toward one." She says this without pity. She says it the way she says everything, directly, efficiently, without the padding that most people use to soften hard truths. It's one of the things that makes her a good CEO and a difficult person to know. Graham looks at his notebook, then at the coffee in his hand, then at the building across the street. "Okay," he says. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps Untold Hearts reach more people who need to hear stories like this. Now, back to the story. Graham starts that night. Victoria leaves him a badge, a set of keys, and a list of instructions taped to the janitorial closet on the ground floor. The instructions are typed, bullet-pointed, and precise. This is a woman who does not leave room for ambiguity. He reads the list twice. It covers everything: which floors to clean, which offices to avoid, because people leave sensitive documents on desks where the vacuum bags are kept, how to arm the alarm when he leaves. He starts on the ground floor and works his way up. The building is quiet at night, just the hum of the HVAC system, the occasional ping of an elevator, the distant sound of traffic on the wet streets outside. Graham moves through the offices with methodical efficiency, emptying trash, wiping surfaces, vacuuming carpets. His body does the work automatically, the way it used to do the commute from Brooklyn to Manhattan, present but not engaged. His mind is somewhere else. His mind is on the 14th floor. He saw the whiteboard. He didn't mean to look. He was emptying the trash in the main conference room at 2:17 a.m. He knows the exact time because he looked at his watch, the way he always looks at his watch, because time is one of the few structures he still respects. And there it was. 3 whiteboards, pushed together, covered in equations and diagrams and crossed-out attempts. He stood in front of them with a trash bag in one hand and a spray bottle in the other, and his mind did what his mind always does. It started solving. The problem on the whiteboard is a resource allocation optimization with a cascading failure component. He can see that immediately. The team has been trying to model the failure cascade using standard stochastic methods, treating each node in the network as an independent variable with a probability distribution. That's the textbook approach. It's also wrong. Not wrong in the math. The math is clean, even elegant. Wrong in the assumption. They're modeling the hospitals as if they're machines, as if a nurse calling in sick at a rural hospital in Vermont is a random event with a predictable probability distribution. It's not. It's a human event. And human events are driven by factors that don't show up in probability models. Exhaustion, resentment, family emergencies, the slow accumulation of burnout that makes a person decide on a Tuesday night that they're not going back tomorrow. Graham knows this because he used to build models exactly like these, and he knows their limits because he spent the last 3 years living on the other side of the equation, being the variable that no model accounts for, the human who falls through the gap between what the math predicts and what actually happens. He sets down the trash bag. He picks up a marker. He doesn't write on the whiteboard. He's not that presumptuous, not yet. Instead, he pulls his composition notebook from his backpack. He brings it everywhere. It's the one possession he will never leave behind. And he sits in one of the leather conference chairs, and he starts working. By 4 a.m., he's filled 6 pages. The solution isn't complete, but the framework is there. Instead of modeling each hospital as an independent node, he's treating the network as an adaptive system, a system where the nodes influence each other, not just through resource sharing, but through behavioral contagion. When one nurse burns out at Hospital A, it increases the burnout probability at Hospital B, not because of any direct connection, but because the surviving staff absorb the extra workload and the stress propagates through the system like a wave through water. The model needs a behavioral coupling parameter, a variable that captures the human element the way exhaustion and resentment spread through interconnected systems the same way a virus does. He's seen this before. At Harman & Keyes, he built a model for cascading defaults in regional banking networks that used a similar principle. The mathematics are transferable. The insight is the same. You can't model a system of humans as if they're components. You have to model the humanity. Graham finishes cleaning at 5:45 a.m. He leaves the building at 6, arming the alarm behind him. He doesn't leave the notebook. He takes it with him, back to the bench, back to the rain. But he comes back. Over the next week, Graham cleans the building every night and spends 2 hours in the conference room with the whiteboards. He doesn't touch them. He works in his notebook, building the framework page by page, testing it against the data he can infer from what's on the boards. He doesn't have access to the actual datasets, just the equations and the structural diagrams and the frustrated marginalia of a team that's running out of time. By the fourth night, his notebook framework has grown to 41 pages. The behavioral coupling parameter works in theory. He's tested it against 3 hypothetical scenarios, and the predictions hold. But he needs real data to validate it. And he's a janitor. He empties the trash and mops the floors and cleans the bathrooms. And he does not, under any circumstances, touch the computers or the whiteboards or anything that would suggest he is anything other than what he was hired to be. On Thursday of the second week, something changes. Graham is vacuuming the 14th floor hallway at 1 a.m. when a light comes on in the corner office. Victoria Davenport is sitting at her desk, laptop open, reading glasses on, a cup of cold coffee beside her. She's been there since 11, he realizes. He didn't notice because the office door was closed and the lights were off. She must have been sitting in the dark. She looks up and sees him through the glass wall. She waves. Not a dismissive wave, a genuine one, the kind that means, I see you and I acknowledge your existence. Graham waves back. He vacuums past her office and continues down the hall. He does not stop. He does not knock. He does not say, "Excuse me, Ms. Davenport, but I noticed the cascading staffing variable in your Meridian project, and I believe the solution requires a behavioral coupling parameter derived from adaptive network theory." He does not say this because he has learned, in 3 years of invisibility, that people do not want to hear solutions from men who sleep on benches. He has learned that expertise without credentials is indistinguishable from arrogance, and that offering unsolicited brilliance when you're holding a vacuum cleaner is a reliable way to lose the only job you've had in 3 years. So he vacuums, and he goes back to the conference room at 2 a.m. and works in his notebook, and he leaves at 6. But this time, when he leaves, something is different. He leaves 1 page of the notebook, a single page torn out carefully, the edges rough, on the conference room table, beneath the trash can he's just emptied. Not on top of the table, not next to the whiteboard. Beneath the trash can, where it could be an accident, where it could have fallen from someone's folder. Where it provides plausible deniability for a man who isn't supposed to know anything about anything. The page contains the behavioral coupling parameter. Just the parameter, not the full framework, not the derivation, not the 41 pages of supporting work, just the key, the single equation that if the team is smart enough to see it, will unlock the entire problem. Raj finds the page at 8:47 a.m. on Friday morning. He almost throws it away. It's a single sheet of notebook paper, handwritten, slightly crumpled from being under the trash can. He picks it up, glances at it, and stops. He reads it again. He reads it a third time, standing in the middle of the conference room with his coffee growing cold in his hand, his eyes moving across the equation with the increasing speed of a man who is watching a locked door swing open. "Tessa," he says into his phone, his voice strange and tight. "Get Victoria. Now." 20 minutes later, Victoria is standing in the conference room. Raj has transcribed the equation onto the whiteboard in blue marker, separate from the team's work, framed by itself, like a painting in a gallery. "Where did this come from?" Victoria asks. "I found it under the trash can." "Under the trash can? It must have fallen off someone's desk or—" Raj trails off. He doesn't have an explanation. Neither does anyone else on the team, because when Victoria asks each of them, all 9, one by one, whether they wrote it, every single one says no. "But does it work?" Victoria asks. Raj's eyes are bright behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Victoria, I've been staring at this equation for 20 minutes. If this is what I think it is, a behavioral coupling parameter for adaptive network modeling, then yes, I think it works. I think it solves the rural variable. I think it might solve the whole damn thing." Run it. They run it. By noon, the preliminary results are in. The behavioral coupling parameter, integrated into the existing Meridian framework, reduces the error margin on the 5 rural hospitals from 34% to 7%, 7%, within acceptable range, within contract specifications. By 3 p.m., the full simulation is complete. The platform works. All 17 hospitals, the cascading staffing variable, the thing that has defeated 9 MIT and Stanford graduates for 5 months, has been solved by a single equation on a piece of notebook paper found under a trash can. Victoria stands in front of the whiteboard, looking at the equation. She's very still. Her arms are crossed, her reading glasses in one hand, her jaw set in that particular way it sets when she's thinking hard about something that doesn't have a clean answer. "Someone wrote this," she says. "Someone in this building. Someone who understands our problem at a level that none of us do." Raj nods. Find them. If Untold Hearts has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below, and hit that like button if you haven't already. Now, back to the story. They don't find him. Not immediately. Raj asks the team again. He asks the interns. He asks the IT department. He even asks the facilities manager, a brisk woman named Keegan, whether any outside consultants have been in the building. Nobody knows anything. The equation is an orphan, brilliant, decisive, and completely unattributed. Victoria thinks about it all weekend. She lies in bed on Saturday night in her apartment on Beacon Hill, an apartment that is beautiful and silent, and that she has lived in for 8 years, alone since her divorce from a man named Paul, who told her she loved her company more than she loved him, which was true, and which she has never entirely forgiven herself for. And she stares at the ceiling and thinks about a piece of notebook paper under a trash can. Notebook paper, handwritten. She sits up. She reaches for her phone. She calls Tessa. "The cleaning guy," Victoria says. "Graham, the one I hired off the street, he's in the building every night. Victoria, it's 11 p.m. on Saturday. He has a notebook. He writes in it constantly. I've seen him from my office. That paper, it was notebook paper, composition book, the same kind he carries." Silence on the other end. "You think the homeless cleaning guy solved Meridian?" Tessa says. "I think I need to find out." Monday night, Victoria stays late again. Stays. This time on purpose. She dims the lights in her office and works quietly, one eye on the hallway, waiting. At 2:12 a.m., she sees Graham push his cleaning cart past the conference room. He stops. He looks through the glass at the whiteboards. She watches him set down the cart, take the notebook from his backpack, and walk into the conference room. She watches him sit down in one of the leather chairs, open the notebook, and begin writing. His hand moves with that same fluid speed she noticed from 14 floors up. Fast, certain, no hesitation. He's not copying from the whiteboard. He's working alongside it, building something parallel, something that starts where the whiteboard ends. Victoria stands up. She walks down the hallway. Her heels click on the floor and Graham looks up. For a moment, neither of them moves. "That was you," she says from the doorway. "The equation." Graham closes the notebook. Not quickly, deliberately. The way you close a book when you've decided to stop reading. "I don't know what you mean." "The behavioral coupling parameter, found under the trash can last Friday. That was yours." He doesn't answer. "Graham, that equation solved a 5-month problem that 9 of the best data scientists in the country couldn't crack. I'm not here to fire you. I'm here to ask you who you are." The conference room is quiet. The HVAC hums. The city glows beyond the windows. Graham sits in the leather chair with his composition notebook in his lap and his janitor's badge clipped to his gray thermal shirt, and he makes a decision. "My name is Graham Everett," he says. "I used to be a quantitative analyst at Harman & Keyes in New York. I specialized in predictive modeling for complex adaptive systems." Victoria doesn't move. Her expression doesn't change. She's a woman who has trained herself to absorb surprises without showing it. A skill she developed in boardrooms where showing surprise is showing weakness. "I left 3 years ago," Graham continues. "My wife died. I couldn't reconcile the work with what I'd learned about what matters. I walked away. And then I kept walking, further than I planned. And you ended up on a bench across the street from a data analytics firm." "I didn't plan that either. But you saw the whiteboard. I clean this room every night. The equations were..." He pauses. "They were calling to me." That sounds dramatic. "I mean, the problem was interesting. Your team's approach is strong. The math is clean. But they're modeling humans as independent variables, and humans aren't independent. They're connected. Behavior propagates through networks. Exhaustion, resentment, burnout, these aren't random events. They're contagious. Your model needs a coupling parameter that accounts for behavioral contagion across the network." He says all of this the way someone might describe what they had for breakfast, factually, without emphasis, as if the insight that eluded 9 brilliant scientists for 5 months is simply obvious. Victoria pulls out a chair and sits across from him. "Show me." Graham hesitates, then he opens the notebook to page 1 and slides it across the table. Victoria reads. She's not a mathematician, but she's spent 12 years surrounded by them, and she can follow the logic even when the notation is beyond her. She reads for 15 minutes, she turns pages, she sees the derivation, the coupling parameter, the adaptive network framework, the scenario testing, the 41 pages of meticulous, beautiful, devastating work. "Graham," she says, looking up, "this is extraordinary." He says nothing. "This isn't just a fix, this is a new framework. This could change how the entire industry models human-system interactions." "It's just math," Graham says, but something in his face shifts. A micro-expression, a softening around the eyes, the look of a man who has not heard someone say his work is extraordinary in a very long time. "It's not just math," Victoria says, "and you know it's not." What happens next does not happen cleanly. Victoria wants to hire Graham immediately, not as a janitor, but as a consultant, a senior analyst, a named contributor on the Meridian project. Graham resists, not because he doesn't want the work. The work is already living inside him, the equations already expanding in his notebook every night, but because the gap between who he was and who he is feels unbridgeable. He is a man who sleeps in shelters. He owns one shirt. His daughter hasn't seen him in 2 years. "I'm not that person anymore," he tells Victoria, sitting in the conference room at 3 a.m, 2 empty coffee cups between them. "Which person? The analyst or the janitor?" "Either, both. I don't know who I am right now." Victoria looks at him. She's quiet for a moment. Then she says something that Graham will replay in his mind for years afterward. "When I started this company, I was sleeping in my car. I had $60,000 in student loan debt, no investors, and a business plan I'd written on napkins at a diner in Somerville. I was nobody. I had nothing except a conviction that I could solve problems that other people couldn't. That's all you need, Graham. You don't need a suit. You don't need an address. You need a notebook and a mind. And you already have both." She says this without sentimentality. She says it the way she says everything, like a fact, verifiable and precise. Graham stares at the table. His hands are flat on the surface. His jaw is tight. "Okay," he says, "but I keep cleaning. The building still needs cleaning, and I need the routine. I need the night hours, the quiet, the structure." Victoria almost says something. She almost says that cleaning offices is beneath him, that his talents are wasted on a vacuum cleaner, that the world needs his mind more than it needs clean carpets. But she doesn't, because she's smart enough, and for all her sharpness kind enough, to understand that a man who has lost everything needs to rebuild from the ground up, and the ground, for Graham Everett, is a janitorial cart and a set of keys and the knowledge that he has a place to be tonight. "Deal," she says. "You clean and you consult. Same hours, I'll pay you for both." They shake hands across the conference room table. His hand is rough, hers is firm. They hold on for a moment longer than a handshake requires. Over the next 3 weeks, Graham Everett works from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the Davenport Analytics building. From 10 to midnight, he cleans. From midnight to 4, he sits in the conference room and builds the adaptive network framework. From 4 to 6, he cleans again. He showers in the gym on the second floor. He sleeps at the shelter or on the bench when the weather permits. Or occasionally, with increasing frequency, on the couch in the break room, where someone has left a blanket and a pillow that he suspects Victoria placed there but will never confirm. The Meridian project transforms. Graham's framework doesn't just solve the rural hospital variable, it redefines how the entire platform processes human behavior. Raj and the team spend the first 3 days skeptical, the next 3 days astonished, and the rest of the month working alongside a framework they didn't build, feeding data into a model that works better than anything they've ever seen. Graham doesn't attend the daytime meetings. He doesn't meet the team in person until the second week, when Raj stays late one night to run a simulation and finds Graham at the whiteboard, writing equations in the careful sloping hand that Raj now recognizes from the notebook page that changed everything. "You're the ghost," Raj says from the doorway. Graham turns. "I prefer nocturnal consultant." Raj laughs. It's the beginning of something. Not friendship exactly, but the mutual respect of two people who speak the same language. Over the following nights, Raj starts staying late, then 2 other team members, then 3. By the 3rd week, there are 5 people in the conference room at 2 a.m. working on Meridian, and Graham is at the center of it, standing at the whiteboard with a marker in his hand and his thermal shirt and janitor's badge, explaining behavioral contagion in healthcare networks with the quiet authority of a man who has lived inside the data he's modeling. The first night Raj stays, he brings a laptop loaded with the actual Meridian datasets, the real numbers, the patient flow data, the staffing records from all 17 hospitals. Graham hasn't seen real data in 3 years. He sits in front of the screen, and his hands hover over the keyboard the way a pianist's hands hover over keys after a long absence, remembering the feeling, testing the distance between his fingers and the thing he used to do without thinking. "You okay?" Raj asks. "Give me a minute." Graham takes that minute. He closes his eyes. He breathes. And then his hands come down on the keyboard, and he begins working through the datasets with a speed and precision that makes Raj pull his chair closer and lean forward, because what he's watching is not a man reviewing data, it's a man coming home. By 3 a.m. that first night, Graham has identified 3 additional variables the team had been treating as noise: seasonal migration patterns in rural communities, the correlation between local school schedules and ER intake volumes, and a staffing variable they'd completely missed: the ripple effect of a single experienced nurse retiring from a rural hospital. Not just the lost hours, the lost institutional knowledge, the 30 years of knowing which doctor prefers which approach, which patient's family needs extra communication, which supply closet has the backup defibrillator pads. That knowledge doesn't show up in any database, but when it walks out the door, the system degrades in ways that pure numbers can't capture. "How did you see that?" Raj asks, staring at the screen. "Because I've been on the other side of those numbers," Graham says. "I've been the person who falls through the model's blind spot. When you live outside the system, you learn where its edges are." Raj is quiet for a moment, then he says, "I've been working on this project for 11 months. I have a PhD from MIT, and I never once thought to look at it from the perspective of the people inside the data." "That's not a failure," Graham says. "That's a limitation of the training. We teach analysts to see patterns in numbers. We don't teach them to see the humans who generated those numbers. It's the difference between reading a map and walking the road." The other team members arrive on subsequent nights with their own laptops, their own questions, their own quiet revelations. A woman named Preeti, who specializes in machine learning, sits beside Graham for 3 hours one night and rebuilds her entire feature engineering approach based on a conversation about how rural hospital cafeterias serve as informal communication networks for staff. A man named Kwame, who does the statistical validation work, brings Graham a printout of his methodology, and Graham finds 2 assumptions that have been slightly off for months, not wrong enough to flag, but wrong enough to compound over 17 hospitals into the error margin that was killing the project. Each night, the conference room fills a little more. Each night, the work gets a little closer. And each night, Graham puts down the whiteboard marker at 4 a.m., picks up his cleaning cart, and finishes his janitorial rounds. Nobody questions this. Nobody suggests he stop cleaning. They understand, the way Victoria understood, that the cleaning is not beneath him, it's the foundation he's standing on. Victoria watches from her office. She doesn't join the late-night sessions. She understands that Graham needs to build trust with the team on his own terms without the CEO hovering. But she watches. And something she hasn't felt in a long time. Not since the early days, not since the car and the napkins and the 60,000 in debt, stirs in her chest. It's not pity. It's not charity. It's recognition. She sees in Graham the same thing she saw in herself 12 years ago, a person who has been reduced to nothing and is choosing, one night at a time, to build something from the wreckage. The Meridian platform is delivered to the hospital consortium on April 12th, 3 days ahead of deadline. It works. All 17 hospitals. The predictive accuracy exceeds contract specifications by 11%. The consortium's chief medical officer calls Victoria personally to say it's the most sophisticated analytics platform he's ever seen, and that the behavioral coupling model, the thing Graham built in a composition notebook on a park bench in the rain, is the kind of insight that changes a field. The call comes in at 3:47 p.m. Victoria is at her desk. She puts the phone down, stands up, walks to the window, and looks at the bench across the street. It's empty. It's been empty for weeks now. Graham hasn't sat there since the night she hired him, but she looks at it the way you look at the place where something important started. Tessa appears in the doorway. Good news? $42 million. So very good news. Victoria turns from the window. Schedule a team celebration for Friday. Catered, champagne, the whole floor. And Tessa, I need you to do something else. She pauses. I need you to look into senior analyst positions. Salary, benefits, the works. I want a formal offer ready by end of week. Tessa raises an eyebrow. For the janitor? For the genius. What Graham doesn't know, what Victoria hasn't told him and isn't sure she ever will, is that she almost lost the company before he came. Not just the Meridian contract, the whole company. The investors had been nervous for months. 2 of her 3 board members had quietly begun exploring acquisition offers. Her CFO had drafted a contingency plan that included laying off 40% of the staff. Victoria had spent nights in her office staring at spreadsheets that all told the same story. Without Meridian, Davenport Analytics had 18 months of runway, maybe less. Graham didn't just solve an equation, he saved 140 jobs. He saved the health insurance that pays for Raj's daughter's asthma medication. He saved the mortgage payments of people he's never met. He saved the retirement accounts of the facility staff, including Keegan, who has worked in this building for 22 years and has a grandson starting college in the fall. He saved a company that a woman built from nothing in the back of a car 12 years ago, and he did it from a janitor's cart at 2 in the morning. Victoria knows all of this. She carries the weight of it the way she carries everything, silently, precisely, without visible strain. But it's there. And when she thinks about the man on the bench and the notebook in the rain, something shifts in her chest that she doesn't have a name for yet. Victoria holds a team celebration on the 14th floor. Catered lunch, champagne, the works. The entire data science team is there. Raj gives a short speech about perseverance and collaboration. Victoria thanks everyone by name. She does not mention Graham. This is deliberate. She has asked him privately whether he wants to be acknowledged, and he said no. Not because he doesn't deserve it, he does, and he knows it, but because he's not ready. The gap between the bench and the boardroom is still too wide. He needs more time. But after the celebration, when the team has gone home and the 14th floor is quiet, Victoria finds Graham in the conference room. He's erasing the whiteboards, carefully, methodically, the way he does everything. The equations that consumed 5 months and 9 brilliant scientists and 1 homeless man are disappearing under the sweep of a felt eraser. Don't erase all of it, Victoria says from the doorway. Graham turns. He's holding the eraser in one hand and a marker in the other. His janitor's badge is on his chest. He looks like what he is, a man caught between 2 lives. The consortium loved it, she says. I heard. $42 million, Graham. You saved this company. He puts the eraser down. He looks at the whiteboard, half erased, equations in empty space, the before and after on a single surface. Your team saved the company. I just pointed them in a direction. Victoria crosses the room. She stands in front of him. She's shorter than he is by several inches, but she has a presence that makes height irrelevant. I need to tell you something, she says, and I need you to hear it without deflecting. He waits. You are the most talented person I have ever worked with, and I have worked with very talented people. What you built in that notebook, in the rain, on a bench, with nothing, is better than anything my team could have produced with $1 million budget and a year of runway. You didn't point them in a direction, you gave them a map, and the map was drawn by a genius who was too busy being invisible to know he was still a genius. Graham doesn't speak. His jaw is tight, his eyes are bright. I want you to stay, Victoria says. Not as a cleaner, not as a night consultant, as a senior analyst, with a salary, benefits, a desk, and your name on the research. Victoria, and I want you to call your daughter. The room goes very still. Graham's hand, the one holding the marker, trembles. I know about Phoebe, Victoria says quietly. Tessa found the guardianship papers when we ran a background check. I know she's with your sister-in-law in Connecticut. I know you haven't seen her in 2 years. It's not my business. You're right. But I've watched you for a month, Graham. I've watched you clean toilets and solve problems and sleep on a couch and refuse to take credit for the thing that saved 140 jobs. You are a good man. You are a good father who is punishing himself for something that doesn't deserve punishment. And your daughter deserves to know that her dad is still here. Graham sets the marker on the whiteboard tray. He braces both hands on the table and lowers his head. His shoulders shake once, then again, and then he's crying, silently, the way people cry when they've been holding it for so long that the release is more physical than emotional, a thing the body does because the mind can no longer contain it. Victoria doesn't touch him. She doesn't say anything else. She stands there, arms at her sides, and gives him the space to feel what he's feeling without an audience, without performance, without the demand for gratitude or narrative closure. When he lifts his head, his eyes are red, but his voice is steady. Okay, he says, I'll stay, and I'll call Phoebe. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that brilliance has nothing to do with circumstance and everything to do with who you are when nobody's watching, please share it. Subscribe to Untold Hearts for more stories proving that the most powerful people aren't always the ones in suits. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been surprised by someone you underestimated? 6 months later. Graham Everett is a senior analyst at Davenport Analytics. He has a desk on the 14th floor, near the window, at his request, overlooking the bench across the street. He wears a button-down shirt and khakis to work, though he still keeps the gray thermal in his bottom drawer. Not as a reminder of what he was, but as proof that it happened, that the distance between the bench and the desk is real and measurable, and that he crossed it. Phoebe visits every other weekend. She's 13 now, long dark hair like her mother, Laura's same sharp laugh, a quiet intensity that Graham recognizes as his own. The first visit was hard. She stood in the doorway of his new apartment, a one-bedroom in Cambridge, small but clean, with a desk in the living room covered in composition notebooks, and she looked at him with an expression that contained every emotion a child can hold: anger, relief, love, abandonment, hope. "Hi, Dad," she said. "Hi, Phoebe," he said. She didn't hug him, not that first time. She sat on the couch and he sat in the chair across from her, and they talked for 2 hours about everything except the 2 years he was gone. That would come later. The hard conversations, the apologies, the slow, meticulous repair of a bond that was strained but never broken, because bonds between fathers and daughters are like the adaptive networks Graham models. They bend, they stress, they sometimes fail at individual nodes, but the network holds. She asked him what he'd been doing. He told her the truth, not all of it, not the worst parts, but enough. The bench, the shelters, the notebooks, the cleaning, the equations that saved a company. She listened the way Laura used to listen, completely without interruption, her eyes steady on his face. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a composition notebook, black and white, marbled cover, identical to his. "I started writing in these too," she said. "After you left. It made me feel closer to you." Graham looked at the notebook in his daughter's hands and felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, not damage, but the opposite. The way ice cracks on a river in spring. Something that had been frozen for a long time beginning to move again. "What do you write?" he asked. "Poems, mostly. Some math. Denise says I got your brain. You got your mother's brain. I just got the math part." Phoebe almost smiled. "Mom was smarter than both of us." "She was," Graham said. "She absolutely was." The second visit, she hugged him. He held on for a long time. Victoria and Graham have dinner together on Thursdays. Not at expensive restaurants. At the diner on Tremont Street where Victoria used to eat when she was sleeping in her car, back before the company, before the corner office, before any of it. They sit in the same booth she sat in 12 years ago, and they talk about work, about Phoebe, about the things they've lost and the things they're building. They are not together. Not yet. There is something between them, a gravity, a recognition, the pull of two people who have both been broken and rebuilt and who understand each other's architecture in a way that other people can't. But they are patient. They have both learned, in different ways, that the best things are built slowly. On the bench across the street from Davenport Analytics, someone has left a small brass plaque. It was Victoria's idea, installed on a Saturday when Graham was visiting Phoebe in Connecticut. It reads, "Sometimes the answer is sitting right outside your door." Graham found it on a Monday morning. He stood in front of it for a long time, his coffee in one hand, his composition notebook in the other. Then he went inside. He took the elevator to the 14th floor. He sat at his desk by the window, opened the notebook to a fresh page, and started solving.